and discussion on PropTech. Just a couple news or announcements around REIC. We do have a Young Professionals Friendsgiving at the Hall in Franklin on November 19th. And then we are working on putting together a hybrid event, hopefully for November 18th, where people can join virtually and potentially in person at the University Club for those that would like to do that, hopefully, and obviously in a socially distant manner, but hopefully we'll be putting together a great program for everybody. And then lastly, we are planning on scheduling a holiday event in December, hopefully at the History Center in downtown Tampa. They have a nice outdoor space and can hopefully do a nice gathering. I think with COVID and just I think probably everything being in flux, we thought it'd be nice to do a program in December, which is a little different than the usual schedule for REIC. So hopefully we'll have some, in addition to this program today, some great programming coming up for everybody that can partake either virtually or in person. So with that, I want to introduce Ann Pollock, who is the managing member of Fletcher, Fisher & Pollock. And she's been nice enough to put this program together and gather this panel. And so it should be an interesting topic and discussion. And I'm going to hand it over to her. And thank you to everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today.
All right, well, thanks so much, Greg. And thank you again, all of you, for attending today. We're very excited to get going. I am Ann Pollock. I'm a co-owner of Fletcher, Fisher & Pollock. We're a boutique women-owned land use, real estate, and business planning firm. We represent developers, investors, property owners, businesses across the Tampa Bay area and the state of Florida in acquisition, sale, development of real estate. I'm also a proud board member of REIC, and I'm excited to have put together this panel for us today. We're going to take a look at PropTech, but in a slightly different way from maybe what you've seen before. We're not just going to be looking at pretty pictures of cool stuff that's happening elsewhere. We wanted to discuss the reality of it. Who uses it? How are they using it? What are they using? And more importantly, how can we, as who may or may not be kind of tech savvy in ourselves, get connected into it? How can we find those companies and software to make ourselves cutting edge for our own clients in our own sector of the real estate industry? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a real brief introduction of our panelists today, and then we'll get going. We have Andrew Ackerman, who is the managing director of DreamIt, a venture capitalist firm. Andrew runs DreamIt's Urban Tech Accelerator. He sees over 2,000 startups each year, and he selects fewer than 15 to work with and ultimately invest in. He works with more than 80 corporate partners as well to help them find and work effectively with startups and to develop and execute on their strategies to encourage internal innovation. We've also got today with us Kyle Collar. He leads the research department in Florida for JLL. JLL is now identifying itself really as a tech company that does real estate, so it's perfect for us today. Kyle supports both tenant rep and agency brokers by performing market analyses, statistical analyses, financial analyses, lots of analyses for a research director, and also doing data visualization. So he helps to research and implement the tech tools that JLL uses in its operations. And finally with us today is Camille Renshaw, the CEO and co-founder of B&E, which is the first tech-driven brokerage and trading platform for net lease real estate. It was launched in December 2017. They now have offices in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Atlanta, Denver, and most importantly, Tampa. Through this technology and data that they've amassed, buyers and sellers can conduct entire transactions online, review real-time credit, news, tenant data while they're trading, and basically it's kind of like an online stock trading platform, except it's real estate. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And I want to start out with a question for you that's basically, tell us a little bit more about what your company is doing and what PropTech means to you. PropTech is kind of a broad term. So Kyle, maybe you can get started and let us know what it means to you and a little bit more about JLL.
Yeah, I'd love to kick it off. Thanks again for having me. JLL is a Fortune 500 global commercial real estate firm. And per your introduction, I kind of run the research department in Florida. I actually sit locally in Tampa. And this is a really, really topical conversation for us because PropTech has really been kind of redefining the commercial real estate industry. I would say over the last 3 to 5 years is when we've really seen that pace kind of quicken. And everything that we're going through right now in the current economic environment and with COVID has really accelerated that trend to an even quicker pace. And so when I think about kind of prop tech, what it is, how we use it in our industry, I really think of it as any of those tech tools that we're leveraging really along the commercial real estate or just the real estate process. So that can be total back of house, data management, something I'm obviously very familiar with on the research side, all the way to kind of that client experience and how we kind of present the market, show space, show a building, industry trends, whatever it might be, and kind of the tools that we use to do that. And so what we've kind of seen is it's kind of a shift away from the, okay, if you need to know about the market, here's kind of a static quarterly report. And if you want to tour space, let's organize travel schedules and get everybody together and tour the space physically, to now, okay, what kind of tools can we do to kind of make that process a little bit more efficient? Not replacing them entirely, but again, making them, again, a little bit more user-friendly, both for the client and for, internally within JLL.
Awesome. Camille, why don't you have a tech background that you've brought into your own company. What do you see as prop tech? What's in, what's out, and what is B&E doing?
First, it's great to see everybody kind of virtually. I appreciated being able to speak with you guys. I guess it was about a year ago. I can't remember exactly which month it was, about big data. So, this feels like a continuance of that. I think where this conversation is going to go is not just, hey, where's PropTech today, but where is PropTech in the middle of COVID? How is that? How are we helping? How is it impacting what we're doing? And so it does feel like a continuation of that discussion. Most of you guys know B&E, we're really a brokerage firm, hopefully a more modern brokerage firm. We help buyers and sellers trade net lease across the country. And as Ann said, it is very much like a stock trading platform. The only exception I would say is that we do have a senior broker with you kind of at every step. So in that way, it doesn't feel dissimilar. One of the things that we're seeing right now, and we can talk about it more, I think we'll talk about it more in this conversation, is this blending of tech and people right now. As we've gotten traction as a segment, PropTech, one of the things that seems abundantly clear to us is, and we kind of joked about it, the four of us offline, we still have clients that are faxing. Maybe the fax dies with COVID. I'm not really sure yet. But, I think one of the challenges for anyone who's really trying to scale, really trying to transition a space, isn't just dropping down new technology on all of you, but having people there at every step that if you don't want to engage with that particular component of the tech, that you're still going to be able to take advantage of the larger picture. So if you're trying to sell a piece of real estate and you really don't want to engage with some of the AI-driven data that we have and how you can comb through it yourself, et cetera, you don't have to. Make your broker do it. Get an email that has it just like you did before. I mean, that may not be the number one way to make your transaction more efficient, but I think that the burden is on us if we are to scale and be successful as PropTech companies to make sure that we're really taking care of the customer, that we're really holding on to that at every step. I've kind of already said this, but I think there's a key word that, Ann, you were setting me up to say, which is B&E sits in the broker tech space. So PropTech and a lot of things around CRE tech. I think Andrew's going to talk about urban tech. There's these different segments or different descriptors that are used for what we all do every day. My particular little place in it is in broker tech, and it's about how to get you guys transacting with more efficiency, especially because it's net lease. It's a lower risk proposition. You guys want all the data that we have so that you can better understand the credit, not just the real estate. But if you're going to, this morning I'm pricing Amazon distribution center with a developer. And for you guys to really understand what's going on with the Amazon credit as though you're buying the stock, but in conjunction with that component of the supply chain. How can our data, how can our news drive from a platform perspective to help you make a safer, better, stronger decision? High pricing is very important in net lease. So how do you, if you're the seller, get the highest price? if you're paying a very high price as a buyer, how do you have great confidence around that?
Perfect, thank you. And Andrew, you kind of come into this from a different perspective, looking at the companies that are actually creating this tech. What does PropTech mean to you? What's in, what's out? What are you seeing?
Yeah, by the way, thank you. Like all too often, they just go in alphabetical order. It's a pleasure to go last for a change. Okay, so yeah, I do come from a little different perspective. So I'm trying to pick the startups to invest in that are the startups that presumably the people in the audience here are ready to partner with or should be looking at. So what that means is generally, these are not guys with cocktail napkins who are just kind of, oh, I'm going to go build this. These are companies that generally speaking have revenue, have referenceable customers. You won't be the first person that they're dealing with in your space. They're ready to scale. That's our sweet spot. But they're still early enough that like, oh my God, I had no idea anyone was doing that. Or yeah, I just heard about that. I know I need to get on that. So early, but not too early is really kind of the informal way of how we look at our stage. I do run what's called our urban tech vertical. The dirty little secret is that we chose to call it urban tech because urban tech actually meant nothing. We wanted it to be broad. When we first came into the space just about 4 years ago, we made the decision that we wanted to include startups that were broadly across prop tech, or also called real estate tech, construction tech as well. We like that space a lot. Within prop tech, we like multifamily, we like commercial, and we were even looking at things that you might think of as transportation or even water. Right? We even look at urban agriculture. The idea being for us, if it's a startup whose customer is a general contractor, a property manager, a property owner, a developer, an architect, a broker, like that's where we want it to play, or B2C, direct to consumer type companies that are in similar spaces. That's our acid test by and large. There is kind of a fuzzy gray line in my view of PropTech between what are tech startups in the real estate space versus real estate companies with a little bit of tech. So, we're all familiar with WeWork, and for all that they talk about, oh, yeah, we're a tech company, that is, pardon my language, BS. They are, at the end of the day, a real estate company. They live and die on real estate economics, and they have a little bit of tech on top, but they're a real estate company. And you'll see, say, discount brokerages, we'll sell the house, you'll pay, 1%. That's a tech company in our world. Sorry, a real estate company, not a tech company in our world. Co-living, very similar. For us, for Dream It, that's out of scope because we're really looking for tech startups servicing the real estate and adjacent spaces at the stage where they're actually ready to scale with the customers. That's my sweet spot.
Perfect. So we've got a wide variety of people coming in and looking at this. Before we get into the elephant in the room, which is COVID and how COVID has really changed what's going on, I want to look generally kind of, and I'm thinking of all our viewers and they're thinking, well, how does this work with our customers? How does this tech work with our employees? What do you see as some of the benefits and constraints of adopting new technology for your business, both internally with your employees and your own internal people working with this technology and moving into something new, and externally with your own clients? Kyle from JLL, how do you see this?
Yeah, some of the benefits I think are more straightforward than the constraints, and it's kind of easy to see some of those. So we talk a little bit about kind of the ability to better kind of capture and present data with data visualization tools, thinking about kind of giving the client control over kind of what they want to see. If you're doing something like virtual space tours or kind of using some kind of interactivity component, some kind of activity tool to kind of capture the market, tour the market. And again, just generally allowing us to work a little bit more efficiently when you look at that, when you bring it back internally within our organization. But I think some of the constraints are kind of, more insightful to kind of wrap your head around. And some of the ones that we've seen, one is definitely buy-in, which is not only, again, with our own team members in terms of these are the tech tools that are going to be used going forward, regardless of COVID. This kind of trend was already in the works and, maybe it's been accelerated, but it is a long-term kind of trend. all the way down to kind of the client, which is they need to be able to see what is useful to them. So the way I think about this is identifying tools that are less about shock value, kind of the new shiny toy, hey, it's cool to kind of look at, and really kind of transitioning more towards tools that kind of have long-term value. So what is going to truly make a difference in kind of the real estate decision for clients? Those are the tools that we kind of want to introduce along that process. And I think some of the main ones that we've seen, especially with COVID, are things like virtual tours. So kind of Matterport is kind of a really common example of kind of a 3D, camera environment where, again, the user takes control of touring the space. Things like data visualization comes down to things like Tableau, geographical software that you can use like Google Earth, which is a free one, or Esri, ArcGIS. So there is an array of tools that kind of speak to that, benefit of having PropTech kind of introduced along the way. But you do have to think about some of those constraints. And the way that we've worked around, especially the buy-in, has been to have some champions for it, some people that have really dove in and utilized it.
Yeah.
And when you see the result of that, it's like, okay, we need to kind of go down this route, or have this fear of kind of being left behind, or at least not being able to leverage some of these, arguably gotta have tools. We've really shifted from the mentality of nice to have to probably should have to, hey, we really need to have these tools kind of going forward.
And I would imagine that as some customers see this, they kind of spread the word, and other customers and other users will ultimately want to jump in on that. Andrew or Camille, do you have kind of a similar sense of?
Sure. Camille, you want to go first?
Well, I was going to say, you asked a question a second ago, Anne, about what's in and what's out. And I would say the word disrupt is out. And I don't know if people are saying this enough, but I know I don't want to be disrupted. I imagine none of you want to be disrupted. None of your businesses want to be disrupted. And there's been a long time where it's been really cool to say you're going to disrupt, you're the disruptor. And I don't think anybody actually wants that. So, I joked last year, I was joking from a lot of panels that, we won't disrupt you. So that's our new slogan. I think that's really important for the clients. Another thing that I've frequently said is that in order to create change in commercial real estate that's sustainable, you have to be, from a tech perspective, you have to be an inside player. You have to be in your market niche every day. And then you also have to understand technology. And an example from our space is, if you are the first two, you're an inside player and you're in your market niche every day, you can actually make more money to just go develop a CBS. You really wouldn't, you could potentially make less money starting a startup and doing technology. And chances are that you actually understand anything about technology are slim if you're capable of doing that first set. So it's really special, as Kyle was saying, the last 3-4 years, maybe 5 years, that we do have some folks that are all three, and they are creating sustainable change. But to get you take all that and you go back to what you really asked, Anne, and it's about making sure that the user experience is super easy, that it's really aligned with what they expect or what can help them. If you're trying to teach them a totally new interface or a completely new process, you're not going to have a lot of adoption. I can give you an example that's not really within the scope of anybody's software or investments here, which is Salesforce. This morning, one of our brokers was saying that he had created an Excel spreadsheet of like everybody that he was contacting on this New York City deal that we have, and the list of folks to reach on a New York City deal are different than any other US transactions and all that. And I wrote him a note CCing our ops team, and I'm like, Salesforce already does that, and you really just need to understand how to run the report. And it was clear there was just a training gap on how to pull this one report. But something like Salesforce, which I'm sure many of the audience members use, is really massive, right? It's so robust and so great that most of us don't, I mean, I'm sure I don't even really fully know its scope of capabilities. So some of this is making it more and more user-friendly, which, Salesforce, I think we've all memorized how to use Salesforce at this point, but I would argue a lot of what it does is not, did not have the greatest UX, the user experience underlined there or looked at. So I think especially when you're talking about people, especially like that Andrew deals with, that might be developers or such, it's so important that it's intuitive.
Cool. Okay, thanks for the transition there. Most of the startups I deal with, like, there's very little tolerance in this space for, just tech people or people from other industries. Like, more than any other industry I've been in, you got to have the industry expertise, or else you just have zero street cred in, with your customers. And while, it's all right for them behind the scenes to talk to me and say, oh, I'm going to disrupt the industry, Camille's 100% right. No one wants a vendor coming up to them and saying, I'm going to eat your lunch, but by the way, pay me for my software. Is pretty tone deaf way to go out and try to win business. Rather than repeat some of the points that Kyle and Camille made, which I totally agree with.
I'm hoping you'll give examples, Andrew. That's what I was about to ask you about.
Oh,
You have more examples than any of us.
So with your permission, let me take it in a slightly different direction. And if you still want examples, hold me to it. I'll give you all the examples in the world. I'm trying to put myself in the audience's shoes here, right? So, my understanding based on my conversations with Anne before, and is there a lot of people out there who are trying to figure out what kind of tech should I be looking at right now? How do I find it? How do I know that it's right for me? And I can certainly give you a bunch of examples based on what I think you want. But the phrase that I keep coming back to and probably use all too often is your mileage may vary, right? So let's kind of break that down a little bit. Small and mid-sized companies have certain advantages here, right? On the one hand, it's easier for you to figure out as an organization what you're all going to use, what you're going to want to do, right? When you get to very large organizations like JLL, like just getting all the stakeholders to agree we're going to use this, and then you have like one region is a proponent of this one solution for a virtual leasing solution. The other guys hate it, and Seattle wants to use their own tool. Like if you're a small mid-sized business, you don't have to deal with any of that crap. So thank your lucky stars. On the other hand, if you are a JLL, you got the resources to stand up your own VC fund. Like JLL Spark's a great fund. I mean, there are very few corporate-run VC funds that I'll say that about. JLL Spark is one of them. They can go out there and their job 24/7 is to find great startups. And if you're a smaller, mid-sized company, you just don't have that luxury. You have to be much more careful about picking your shots. So what I generally recommend is you go out there, and at first, the first thing you want to do is you really just want to read as widely as possible to get a sense of all the things that are out there. If I'm multifamily, or smart apartments, the thing that I want to do now. Do I need a virtual leasing solution to sell, to rent the apartments I'm in, or sell condos or office space? Do I need virtual staging? Get out there and at least read a little widely, or very widely, so you get a sense of what all the things are that are bubbling up. And in between us, if you'd like, I'm sure we can come up with a bunch of different, newsletters you can subscribe to, or VCs that you can look at to get a sense of what that is. But then whittle it down to a handful of tech that you're like, you know what, I really need this. I think it's going to make a major difference to my business. I think other people are adopting it. If I don't have it, I'm going to be like the one guy bringing chip flint, knives to a steel knife fight, right? Come up with like 2, 3, 4 critical areas that you want to focus on. And then you can go deep and start to look at, well, who's out there doing this, right? And unlike me, stage matters a little less to you, right? You don't want somebody who's got a cocktail napkin and they're still figuring it out, but it doesn't matter to you if, they're relatively early and, they've got 10 clients or they got 100 clients. What matters to you is like they've got a solution that is ready for you to use and it solves your problem. So my advice out there, it really boils down to this, right? Get smart enough that kind of the universe of things that are out there, and then get focused enough that you're not, willy-nilly going out there chasing shiny toys, but you're really going to go deep in the ones that you think matter to you. And then from there, we can give you more tactics if you'd like. But
I would jump on that and kind of add, as somebody who has to do this as a leader of our company a lot, and I have a lot of very engaged young people who are always bringing me new technologies that we should immediately adopt, and I don't always agree or don't know enough to agree or disagree. what we do, and one of these is actually one of Andrew's startups, so I'll reference that. You know, when we're trying to do complementary data to the data that we collect. So we believe we have the largest data set in net lease. Those are going to be real-time listings that are available in the US market today. We have the most comprehensive list of that. It's private, just our brokers and our clients use it. We don't sell it or subscriptions or anything like that. Again, we're just a brokerage shop. But we don't have lease data. We do have closed comps, but we don't track lease data. It's not what we do. So we're always looking for new sources of lease data. And I certainly wouldn't want to offend anyone on the call, but CoStar is not the greatest source for that. So we're looking for new places to find that. And I would say, you know, the startup community is where to go. So we began this search 3 years ago when we started the company. We're still wrestling with it. But here's my chief advice about this. So we went to Cherry. I think Andrew actually introduced me in person to the CEO of Cherry, and we met and realized like it's close, but at that stage it was really, from a geographic standpoint, really limited to New York City, which is great, but not that helpful for us as a national firm. And then we went to Reonomy, which was really great, but they didn't actually track the lease components that we needed, those particular lease. You can imagine for your own business, like how this could be a miss. And we went through 5, 6 of these. And I've done this for various components of our business. And I do try and get the analyst team to do it first, because they've got the systems tools headspace to just drill down and look at 50 things and bring me 4 or 5. And that's what I would suggest that you do within your teams. And then we reach a no, right? And we stay with CoStar. But that wasn't the end of the story. We've been going back every 6 months to these companies, and they're bigger and they're changing. And we are actually right now in the midst of making a change in that category, or at least adding to what we already have. And it's because we've had this iterative approach to looking at what startups are doing. If you go and look once, you might be too early, or they just haven't had that conversation with you yet that had that aha moment that created the pivot. And once they talk to a couple of you, they may be able to cheaply and easily add something that really helps your business, but they won't have it for 6 or 8 months. So I think something, if you want to engage with this, is you need to make a best practice at this point of visiting particular categories of tech, some iteration, quarterly, semi-annually, whatever works for you and your business.
So 2 quick points. I love it when other people talk
remind
my
everyone,
book.
if you have questions, please put them in the question and answer, because as we keep going, we want to be able to have time to answer your questions. Sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say two quick reactions. I love it when other people talk about my companies. It feels a lot less self-serving. The other thing, and I want to highlight it, is when you're looking at a tech startup, success isn't, oh, I'm going to do a partnership with that company. Success is learning things quickly, right? So if you're going through and you're cycling through, like, I'm going to look at these types of startups, that's one of our key needs. Your goal is, I want to identify who I want to look at quickly. I want to figure out as quickly as possible, should I be talking to these guys now, later, not at all, and just cycle through them. Like, to be able to say, hey, I spent a week talking to these, this company X, they're just not there yet. That's a win, right? Because that means next week you can talk to the next one. A loss is, I spent 3 months talking to these people and I figured out they're not right for me, but I should have figured that out in a week. All right, so you want to
also I would say, because we've had this in COVID ourselves, and this doesn't necessarily benefit startups, but I think it benefits the audience, is they come to you and they ask you for a 3-year agreement. I would be really hesitant to go that long. I don't think you should do a 6-month agreement, but you can figure out, whatever the application is it a year? Is it 18 months? Feels like that's really long on the plank. If you get out to that in terms of the subscription, because competitors, as I'm saying, are going to show up and things are going to change, and you're not going to be able to pivot as well as your competition if you've committed to a really long-term subscription of something. Will you get cost savings for the 3-year subscription? Seemingly, but it might not actually turn out that way in 18, 24 months when you want to pivot.
Kyle, can you tell us, Andrew brought up about the fund that JLL has created to find this new tech. How are you doing that, and how is this helping JLL to find the right technology for its uses?
Yeah, it's funny. This conversation translates pretty well over to the JLL side because, like Andrew mentioned, big organization. And so you kind of have almost this trickle down effect where nationally they're choosing these resources, they're implementing them. And then the local markets, like me sitting in Tampa and looking over Florida, have to decide, okay, we've got this giant universe of tools now, which is great, but which ones really translate to the local market and are going to be useful for us to use, both internally and externally. So you still have that kind of discovery, even though you've got a large organization behind you, in terms of what is actually going to be useful. And so the JLL Spark Fund, it was announced back in 2018, global venture fund. I think the $100 million was the initial, and it's kind of run by two co-CEOs that had some high technology growth experience and background. And now they've looped in kind of this larger JLL Technologies platform. So not only looking at PropTech and specifically startups, but also wrapping in some of the existing tools that JLL had. And it's allowed us to identify, I think their portfolio is a little over 20 technologies or firms at this point, some tools that are, really, really great to introduce along that process. And so just by way of example, I actually was recently demoed one, so it's kind of top of mind. It's kind of a web and mobile application called HQO, and it falls under what we call experience management, which is kind of how does a tenant interact with their space, with the building, with the landlord, with the community that the building's in. And so this app allows kind of that connection between all of those pieces. So you can kind of control your space. You can look at common area amenities in your building, look at events that are going on either in the building or in the environment. And with all of this mixed use activity that we're seeing, especially on the development front, even locally in Tampa, things like that are becoming ever more kind of important. So just by way of example, one of the technology tools that JLL has kind of discovered using that fund. So it's been a game changer.
Does JLL have that, proprietary use of those technologies, or do you find that a lot of these are things that the rest of us can use as well if we need?
Yeah, and that's important differentiation is that some of the tools that I'm talking about or alluding to are proprietary to JLL. They've spent years building them internally, but a lot of them are either third party or otherwise tools that other people can access. They have single-use licenses, small business licenses. And so it doesn't have to be, something that only a large organization has access to. There are some of those things that, can be translated out. So when you think about, 3D imaging, again, some of the data visualization tools like Tableau or ArcGIS, like I mentioned on the geographical side, all of that stuff has, real world small business applications just as much as it does for a large organization. So it does translate pretty well.
Yeah, I would venture to say the vast majority of it, I'm 100% sure. The vast majority of the tools out there are non-exclusive. Like there are a couple of exceptions, like, when Compass bought Contactually, was a really good CRM tool. They bought it, now it's not on the market anymore. We used to use it, right? So I actually do miss Contactually, but the vast majority of the cases, these are startups. HQO in particular, great tenant experience on the commercial side tool. The vast majority of them are available to anyone to use. And the real question is, who do you want to use, bearing in mind that whoever you're going to do, it's going to take a certain amount of your internal resources, time and attention to adopt it. It's not like, I'm going to pick up a hammer. I know I have to hit a nail with it. You're going to have to learn how to use it, to adapt it to your needs. So it's a little bit like you're calling your shots. That's the bigger constraint than like, oh my God, there's, Related is hogging the best solution to, I don't know, the best smart apartment solution, and they're not sharing it. Like that's unlikely. And in fact, I would argue that with very few exceptions, the large companies that try to create something that's proprietary and not share it end up falling behind the market, because it's the startups that can spread the costs of maintaining and growing a solution across many, many clients, almost always end out outpacing and outgrowing and out innovating the in-house solution. So that's a really long-winded way of saying, don't worry about that.
So let's get back to that elephant in the room that is COVID. What are you seeing in terms of the advances in tech that are being created? How startups are reacting? Are they changing products? Are they rethinking old ideas? And, even beyond that, do you see that clients' responsiveness to technology is greater, given that they're all of a sudden thrown home basically, and or they start with Zoom, but maybe that opens their mind to other things. And kind of going back to that idea of faxes, I actually had to refill a prescription, and my doctor said, no, just have your pharmacy fax the request over. And I thought, my goodness, like even with COVID, they're not moving forward, but a lot of other people are. Camille,
Yeah.
what are you seeing? Or Andrew, go ahead, please.
No, you called on Camille. She can go first. I love it when she talks first.
Well, we'll see what I say, Andrew. Who knows? COVID. So I think that the thing to say, probably that everybody in the audience may or may not realize, is net lease is doing really, really well in this time. I in no way want to overlook how tragic some of the things have been that have happened in our country and in commercial real estate, and the taxes that are coming down the pipe. And there are a lot of things that are real negatives coming out of 2020. And as a New Yorker, I especially am really sensitive around those. But I would be amiss if, I don't know if everyone realizes just how well net lease is doing through this segment. So, it's a boom time. I would think that in my life, in the couple of decades that I've been in net lease, I think this is probably going to end up being the biggest quarter ever. And I've heard that out of a lot of our close clients and developers. It's very, very difficult to keep up with the demand. So what does that really mean in relation to COVID? Well, folks are trying to get transactions done more quickly. So like if you go to our platform right now for one of our properties, you can submit an LOI. And if you want to put Camille test and go kick the tires on any of the properties, just add the word my name and test so no one takes it seriously, but go kick the tires on it. It really speeds things up. And that is a lot of what clients are looking for right now. They want faster, more efficient solutions. They're they can't leave their houses, or, have very limited office access. Not everybody's at the office when they show up there, that sort of thing. So they want to feel like they're getting things done, that they're connecting, that they're being heard. So any technology that does that is really important. Obviously things not, no contacting anyone through the process is super important. One of the things that we had in the middle of COVID that we're not having as much now, and this is again because we sell in all 50 states, is we would have, I had a client in Colorado who was trying to buy an asset in Texas, and Texas wouldn't, it was in Illinois and wanted to buy an asset in Texas, and Texas wouldn't let the Chicago client in. So we couldn't do any site visit, any site inspection, anything. So we had to just basically provide him with everything virtually. And so that really accelerated. Now I'd say that client, we're buying another property with him. He's way more comfortable with that. It's, I would say, almost second nature at this point. Like, hey, this is how we did it the first time. Let's do it again. That's something that's really changing. And I don't know that all of these changes are permanent. I really believe, especially for Highwoods that's in the audience, I think we're all headed back to the office. I can't wait to be back in the office. But I don't know if I'm going to be there every day. I may be there a day or two less a week, and so may some of my employees, but I love the office. So hopefully we'll be back there really soon. But I do think some of these things about how we're transacting without the fax machine is permanent. Everyone's kind of figured out one time that we can do. I mean, I hope to do more webinars like this in the future and be on fewer planes. I love seeing you guys, but I would like to see you a couple of times a year, not, monthly. And not you in particular, but a lot of our folks around the country. I've been on a plane 3 or 4 days a week for the last few years, and it's really great that that's not the case. So trying to figure out some mix in between, I think, is what will really happen. And a lot of our clients are purchasing property daily in multi-states. They're adopting some of the same things. How do they begin to do some of this remotely, especially when credit is the true driver in my segment, not the roof? The Starbucks or FedEx or whoever is responsible for the roof. Actually, it's probably not FedEx, but an industrial group is responsible for the roof. How important is it that your junior associate went on site? And different groups have different opinions of that. So I think those changes, some of those will will be permanent. So I would say one other thing that's happened that's interesting that our marketing team just brought to my attention. So I used to be head of sales for 10X, which many of you are familiar with auction.com. Google Capital was the largest institutional owner while I was there. So Google is one of our key partners at B&E and has done tremendous things for us in terms of digital marketing. We were an incubator with them for a while. We just found out that our traffic since pre-COVID, marked in October, for October, is up from Google 450%. 450% since February. I think it was February. So that tells you, you know, folks are wanting to transact online. Folks want to find property online. It's a stunning statistic.
I love it when Camille steals some of my thunder. Yes, I was gonna lead with, like, there's certain things that COVID's accelerated, right? So taking a broader view, like telehealth, remote learning, working from home, like all these kinds of things were the kind of things where you're, you know, if you were a startup in that space, there were some early adopters and you had a lot of clients in the space where it's like, oh, it's not critical. I know we need to do this eventually, but I'm worried about privacy. I'm worried about, you know, will they be productive? I'm worried, oh, we'll figure it out eventually. Well, you know, COVID was like, it's now, right? You know, it's a very firm later has arrived, you will figure it out now. And if you're in the space, you don't unlearn that, right? Once you've solved the cybersecurity issues about working remotely, they're more or less solved. Once you've gotten comfortable with the idea that your employees will work effectively from home, they're solved. Once you've, you know, dealt with the billing issues that come up in healthcare because it's a remote visit, they are solved permanently. So that's been a permanent acceleration of a lot of the trends that were already in progress. Some of the things are, you know, will go part of it, will come back. Like in my world, investors in particular, we love to meet our startups face to face, right? It's really hard to write a check to an early stage company where so much of the investment is, I believe in these founders, and we haven't met them. Now, I'm a weird guy. I do that all the time, but most VCs don't. But I've talked to over 200 VCs over the past 2 months, and about 75% of them have by now made their first Zoom-only investment. In the future, will they continue to do it? Hell no. I mean, but they will get further along, right? Instead of the, oh, first meeting, come meet me. If you're serious, you'll meet me. It'll be.
But it's changing Silicon Valley forever, right?
Yep.
Rents were already too high. It's a dense environment, just like New York City. The floodgates have opened and people are leaving due to the fires and everything else. You used to have to live in Silicon Valley as a startup founder in order to meet VCs. And I think that is a permanent change. Like, that's just not true anymore. And I think that actually bodes well for the startup community in cities like Tampa.
Yeah. And I think, by the way, that's an acceleration of a trend, right? So they were coming out of their bubble already a little bit. The more narrow point I was making, there's a bunch of VCs out there who, like, especially in the Valley, who are like, if you're serious about raising, you're going to come to see me. And I'm like, but it's our first date, right? And I think now what's going to happen is they won't go all the way and do Zoom only investments by choice, but they're more willing to say, you know what, first couple of calls, let's do that on Zoom. And if we get to the point where we're closer, then come out. So it's a little bit like you take a rubber band, you stretch it, and then when you let go, it doesn't go back all the way for some things. Some are permanent accelerations, some are, will rebound a little bit. What's interesting and different, which we haven't covered, is how the startups have responded to COVID. So in some cases, I've seen startups do 180-degree pivots. Like, they were doing X, now they're doing something totally different. Like, it's a big opportunity. I generally think that's a bad idea. The truth is, by the time you've basically rebuilt an entirely new company, somebody else is there first and you have no advantages to be there. And I haven't really seen any of these reboots be successful. What I've seen that's been more interesting is where startups have taken things that they could already do, features that they already had, or things that were on their development pipeline that were kind of down on the list, and they've moved up and rushed into production in a good way, that are suddenly more relevant. So I've seen a lot of companies, they were access control, or they were construction site management tools that have added COVID tracing, right? Or touchless entry, it was an entry solution, now it's touchless. Though ironically, it unlocks the door, but you still have to touch the doorknob to open the door. Fail. Or they've done, it's a security solution, they've got cameras. Well, gee, they can add an infrared camera and do fever detection. So what I've seen as a reaction on the startup side that's been more interesting and been more appropriate is a change in focus. They've elevated things that are now more important that they could already do or that they were almost ready to do. And that's opened some doors for them. It's let them make lemonade out of lemons. The jury is still out on whether or not that's the thin end of the wedge for them. And then like as a customer starts using, I don't know, the COVID tracing feature of their product, they discover more and more of the features and then start paying more and more. In some cases that's happening. In other cases, they seem to be, nope, that's all we needed, thank you. But that's been the interesting change on the startup side of the fence on how they've responded to COVID.
So you have a kind of a balance of startups changing a little bit, seeing based on what they're seeing, and customers changing a little bit based on what they need and what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure we're opening this up for questions. Please, if you do have a question, type it into the Q&A and we'll ask our panelists. I want to get back to something, Andrew, you had mentioned, some other ideas for finding that tech for yourself. Maybe some examples of places that some of the people can look to get started. I know probably some of our, the people watching today are maybe not the research director or the person in charge of finding that, but they know that they can improve their company if they're getting deeper into the tech. What are some thoughts you have on?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So CRE Tech is an organization, the same people who do that put out a newsletter in CRE Tech. They also put out something called the News Funnel, which is an aggregation of a bunch of articles around PropTech. There are a number of others. We could throw out a bunch of newsletters out there, but I'd rather teach people how to find it than give them just a list that may get stale. You got there, the first thing you're going to do is just Google PropTech startups in PropTech startups, real estate startups, commercial real estate startups, residential real estate startups, and you'll start seeing some of the same sites come up. Some of them will be organizations. They may be associated with, NMHC. They might be National Multifamily Housing Council, and other events. Like you'll start seeing these names come up over and over. Subscribe to the newsletters, see how it goes. If they're informative, keep it going. If they're not informative, unsubscribe. The other thing you'll start seeing a fair amount of are VC funds, right? And in fact, if you want to, you can Google PropTech venture capital funds or PropTech VC funds. And there are a handful of them that'll come up over and over again, like Camber Creek, Building Ventures, Brick and Mortar, Fifth Wall, Metaprop. Don't worry, you don't have to take notes. You Google them, I guarantee you they'll be on the first or second search results page, as well as a few others that I just top of mind forgot to mention. Most VC funds, Dream It included, have newsletters. Sign up for those too, right? Go to their portfolio page. Treat it like a shopping list. Gee, I wonder who they've invested in. Oh, I hadn't thought about that, right? Check back in 2 or 3 months, see if any new names have shown up. The truth is, if you pick 5 VC funds that are in your part of the real estate world and you look at their portfolio companies, set aside a couple hours just to understand what they all do, that's probably good enough for step one. That's a good sample of what innovation is out there. And then you could go to drilling down to like the 2 or 3 or 4 key things that you want to pursue, as I mentioned earlier. But that's how I would do it, right? Come up with a list, just get educated, get the newsletters coming. And as Camille said, build it into your process. It shouldn't be something that you do when you get around to. It should be a standing meeting with yourself. Could be an hour a week, could be 2 hours a month, could be, a day a quarter, whatever the cadence is that makes sense for you. That kind of research should be a regular part of your schedule. And that's on top of, okay, I found one, let's talk to the different department heads, who wants to pilot this?
I think it's worth adding that when you do find one, you might not have it as part of your Wall Street Journal reading, like Andrew's suggesting, your regular iteration. I don't go to Crunchbase every day like I do some of the other resources that Andrew mentioned. But I think when you start to look, there is this site called Crunchbase, one word, Crunchbase. And you can go there. I guess it's analogous to like a LinkedIn or something. I don't know what to say. It lists all the startups, and it tells you, like, you could find B&E there. You're going to be able to see who our founders are. You're going to be able to see at least the investors who are public. Not all our investors are listed there, but you're going to be able to kind of see that. It helps. It helps you if you're trying to make an investment. I would say, like for Kyle, if he got excited about a particular piece of software and thought it'd really add to his business, and he went there and saw that Newmark Knight, not to pick on Newmark, but if they were one of the investors in that startup, it might give Kyle pause, depending on what data he's going to be transparent about. Exactly what does that platform do? It doesn't mean that he might not do it, but it at least makes him, it's got some transparency about who you're marrying up with. You also might see that one of these startups is about to do a round of financing. It tells you things like that there. It gives you history, it gives you news. It really is pretty transparent about what's going on with it. I think for us, it pulls from our Twitter. I can't even remember. It's a ton of data that you could find out about B&E. And so Kyle might also look at one of these and think, gosh, I want to invest in that platform in this next round, or, I want to buy them, or something, is this what bigger conversation should I have with them? So I would use Crunchbase as that kind of resource when it kind of gets down to that 1 yard line.
Hey, quick pro tip there. I was going to bring it up because walk before you run. I use it a lot. But one of the things, if you're thinking about adopting technology for your business rather than just investing in them, you can see roughly what they've raised. And as a rule of thumb, if they've raised $5 or $10 million or more, it's a good proxy for, how many customers they may have. I mean, you can't convert from dollars raised to revenue, but a company that's raised $1 million may be a little on the early side for you. 5 to 10, you can get a little bit more comfort that they've been around long enough that they figured a few things out. This
has been a fabulous discussion. I can't believe how fast this hour has gone by. I want to, we've got one more quick question and then we need to wrap it up and have last statements. But from a budgetary standpoint, is there an effort to keep funds allocated to technology that improves upon or streamlines or replaces existing processes, kept separate from technology that innovates? Do you find you're separating those in your budgets and how you're kind of going forward with that?
So most of the customers of startups that are on the smaller level, I don't think they have a separate budget for, for quote unquote innovation. Like the larger guys will have teams, the salary for the innovation team that goes out there and decides what tech they're going to bring back. The biggest budgetary issue that impacts a lot of our startups is much more basic, right? Is it coming out of the operating budget? Is it coming out of CapEx? Is it coming out of marketing? Right? And that's one of basic enterprise sales. Like if you're going out there and trying to figure out who am I going to pitch, one of the qualification questions you're going to ask as subtly and smoothly as you can is, hey, you got money for this? Like who's paying for it? Do you have money in the budget? Who has to approve it? And if you're really smooth about it, you can do that without them knowing you're asking it. But at the end of the day, you got to know. Otherwise, as a vendor, as a startup, you're going to end up wasting a ton of time talking to buyers that can't buy. And from a strategic perspective or a more tactical perspective in the startup, the more you can align how you're asking for the money with the way that it's easiest for your customers to pay, the better it's going to be. So for instance, I'll give you an example. One of the companies in our portfolio, a company called At Home, it's a play on at home, but it only makes sense if you have a Mexican accent. They'll do like on the fly, real-time virtual staging of either rental unit or a new construction unit tailored to that particular buyer or renter's needs and style preferences. Very cool tech. With new construction, it was kind of an easy sell. It came right out of the CapEx budget or maybe the marketing budget, depending on what they wanted, and it was trivial. With rentals and existing rentals, it was tough because they were asking for OpEx money, which was a harder ask until, you know, I'm sitting there in the room, they're doing a customer pinch, and one of the customers like, you know, we're redoing the website. It comes out of marketing. We could probably take this out of marketing too. And then kind of the light bulb went off. Like if they ask for it out of the marketing budget, it's an easier ask than the OpEx budget. So, you know, to answer your question, if you're a customer, do you often have funds, you know, set aside for tech? Pretty rarely at the small and mid-size. And even at the large size, that money tends to be supporting the innovation team. There are very few large companies that I know where the innovation team has a little slush fund that says, oh, you want to do a pilot? Here's $10,000 to do the pilot with. You don't have to take it out of your regular budget. They should, but I don't think they do.
Well, maybe as COVID infiltrates our brains and makes us think a little more creatively, that's one thing that will come from all that is budgeting.
I hope, but I'm not going to bet. I'm not going to bet that way.
Well, I would say that what happens. Well, and practically speaking, like one of the audience members, I think what happens is, you know, you have a level of revenues or EBITDA that you hit last year, and you're trying to hit something this year and another thing next year, right? And you may not have a separate allocation for technology or innovation or whatever, but your department has marching orders that, like I just gave our marketing or whole division. I mean, we sold about $500 million last year. We're going to sell a little more than $500 million this year, and we should be at about $1 billion next year. Great, it's a great idea. How do we actually put wheels on that bus, you know? And the way to do that is through a lot of these technologies. So you may start out with a problem, like my problem is how do I get to $1 billion in market share? And so I will go out and be seeking these Reonomies and Cherries and these other groups, you know, as Kyle was saying, HQO, whatever it is that helps you get to that next level of revenue. And within your company, that's generally how it gets allocated, not within a separate slush fund.
And I think that might.
Last words, and then we're going to have to wrap it up.
I was just going to say, I think that lends well to the discussion around you have to make sure you're focusing on technology that's solving some problem or making some process more efficient, either internally with your own employees or externally with the client, especially if from a budgeting standpoint, you have limitations. And so again, it's really easy to get distracted by the really cool looking stuff. You got to kind of narrow your focus to what's going to actually make a difference in the business.
And I think that sums up everything that we're doing. Figure out what you need, start doing your research on what's out there, and then give it a go, give it a try, and then come back in 6 months and see how they've made their product even better. Okay, so we have just hit the 1 o'clock hour. I want to thank Kyle Collar with JLL, Andrew Ackerman with DreamIt, and Camille Renshaw with B&E. Thank you so much again for joining us. I hope everyone learned a lot, and you are going to put this into your business, everything you've learned. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you on our next REIC program. Take care.
Thank you, Anne.
Thanks for including us.